All right, video number 2 this is on the principles of exercise. Before we talked about the components of fitness, which are what makes up fitness. Now we're going to talk about how do you improve fitness, what kind of personal fitness plan should you make if you're making one. And so these are all the principles of exercise. It really is, if you follow these in your personal fitness plan and you use all of these, then your personal fitness plan should work. And it's going to do some things, and we'll see as we go here. But the first one is called the principle of overload. Well, what does that mean? It's really quite simple. The only way to produce fitness and health benefits through physical activity is to require your body to do more than it normally does. This picture is a good example of this. Look at this. He's on a rickshaw and he's on a motorcycle and he's carrying this big, huge pile of stuff. But he didn't start as a young child carrying all of this stuff. He started with maybe one bag and then he added two, and now that he's further on in their life, they can do this. Same thing for fitness. We don't start with bench pressing 300 pounds. We might start with bench pressing 40 pounds, and each week we might add to that, or every 3 weeks we might add to that. And so that's really what the principle of overload is. If you want to improve fitness, you have to gradually overload what you do. When you can overload certain systems, and we'll talk about it as we go, but that's the principle of overload. It's the first one you might think about when you're making your personal fitness plan. How are you going to overload your systems? The next principle is the principle of progression. And we think of this principle as the safety principle. It really is the amount and intensity of your exercise should be increased gradually. So the principle of specificity says you have to overload. The principle of progression says, yeah, you have to overload, but you should do it in small parts. And so if we think about a runner, each week they should not increase their mileage by 5% or their time spent running by 5%. If you're in the weight room, you should not go from 100 pounds to 200 pounds. It should go from 100 pounds to 110 pounds, maybe 120, and that's going to ensure that you're safe and you're not going to get injured. But it also, those little baby steps helps your body to adjust. Every 3 weeks it should adjust. So every 3 weeks you should be adjusting your either time or intensity. Okay, next we have the principle of specificity. This is the most confusing principle for most students. It really is the specific type of exercise you do determines the specific benefit you receive. But you cannot talk about specificity of exercise without talking about the aerobic and anaerobic system. Because if you think about those two things, then you will be specific when you're doing your workout plan. So let's talk about anaerobic exercise first. As you see here, it says without oxygen. If you break this word down, anaerobic, it translates to without oxygen. Now, it doesn't mean you don't breathe. You don't breathe while you're doing it. But what it does mean is that even breathing is not going to replenish your muscles because it's such a short and intense time. So, for example, when we're doing the push-up test, you're going to do it hard, and then you're going to rest. Okay? Here we have an example on this one. This is someone exercising anaerobically. You say here was 16 400-meter dashes in about 52 seconds, and then for 200 meters they would kind of jog nice and easy, or they would do another 200 meters, and then they would really kind of rest for 2 minutes. So here's them running the quarter mile, here's them resting, here's them running, here's them resting. This is the anaerobic part without oxygen. As he's running this, the breathing that he's doing is not going to be enough to replenish his muscles. So then he has to rest, and he's built up some lactic acid, he rests, and the heart rate comes back down. If you were exercising anaerobically, your heart rate chart should look like this, very jagged up and down. On the flip side of this is aerobic exercise. This translates to with oxygen. And you see after the warm-up here, which is a little jagged, that happens in the warm-up, but after 5 minutes in, they warmed up. It's a pretty consistent and steady state heart rate with a little bit of peak at the end, and then they stopped exercising after 25 minutes and then went down. Now, aerobic exercise is also important. But we have to think about is what do you want and how much time. We'll learn about how long you should exercise aerobically and for what. But think about it. If you're a football player and you're preparing for the football season, should you exercise aerobically or anaerobically? And think of football, when they do a play, they're exercising and then they get to rest. So we would want most of their specific training for a preseason football player to be anaerobic. Likewise, if you was training a cross-country runner, or going to run a marathon, I would want most of my time spent in the anaerobic with a few days spent in anaerobic. But I want my priority being aerobic. All right, so principle of specificity. It is being specific, and if we go back to the definition, Specific type of exercise you do determines the specific benefit you receive. You can apply this to the weight room too. If you want to get big biceps, doing a lot of squats is not going to get you a big bicep. So I want to be specific in the weight room as far as muscle group. When I'm doing any cardiovascular fitness, I want to be specific to anaerobic or aerobic. All right. Next, the FIT principle. You should have all had this in middle school. Let's go through it quick. But F stands for frequency, and it really is how often you do physical activity. And it's a good question, and I get a lot from students. If I want to do aerobic exercise, remember with oxygen, that's that steady state. You're going to get your heart rate up to 160 beats per minute and maintain it for 3 to 5 times a week. So every other day, if you looked at it. Anaerobic, what you're doing is that kind of that football practice where you go really hard and you can bring it back down. If you're going to anaerobically exercise, you do that 1 to 2 times a week. Okay? We talk about intensity. There's a lot in intensity, and I don't know if we do a good job teaching this at school or not yet, but we're working on it. But it's how hard you perform physical activity, and it really goes back to aerobic and anaerobic again. But what I put is some charts here for you. We have a really moderate activity zone. This is the warm-up zone. It's not even, you're not getting much out of it other than kind of raising your body temperature. Then we have zone 1 here, which is a weight control zone. It's really lightweight exercise. You see it's 60% of your heart rate max. It's about 120 beats per minute. Okay, but then we get up to zone 2, which is our aerobic zone, our cardio training and endurance zone. This is about 70% to 80%. For someone your age, it's not 140, it's more like 150, and at 151 to 185, but it depends on your age, so we just have kind of some standards here. But zone 2 is if we're going to train aerobically, our heart rate should be in this zone. Zone 3, if I want to train anaerobically, I want to improve fitness, I would go to zone 3, which is 80%. And then zone 4, this red line, is this maximal effort, and this is really good for improving fitness, but that's 90 to 100% of your heart rate max. You should have calculated your heart rate max in PE class. If you don't know it, a good thing to ask your teacher to do is how do you calculate your aerobic zone, your anaerobic zone, and you should know those for the test. The other thing we have over here is training effect, and you don't know a lot about training effect yet, but you will. But a 5 training effect is really good. We're going to see this later. A 4 to 5, excellent. Anywhere from 3 above when we do an exercise would be great. We're improving fitness. 2, anywhere in the 2s, a 2.9 is maintaining fitness, but a 1 to 1.9 is too easy recovery. If you're doing a recovery day, no problem, but for the most part, we shouldn't be there in PE class. Okay? So here's another example of, these are something you might see as a PE student at Glenbard North. This is a student report from our heart rate software. See, this person's training effect was 2.7, and if we look at 2.7, that's going to be maintaining fitness. But if our goal is to improve fitness, this person should work a little bit harder. We did see their average heart rate was 148, and we talked about for your age, 151 or above should be the goal for your average heart rate. He did have a high heart rate at 161 and a low 140, but he just didn't get this high enough. He exercised for 26 minutes. If we go down here, we can see some energy expenditure. This is actually his heart rate, but it's also how many calories burned. So they burned 321 calories in his 26 minutes. And then here we can see this is minutes, your MVPA, minutes in the moderate to vigorous physical activity, 87% of the time, and they got 26 of the 30 minutes in. I would consider that a really good workout as far as that goes. For that, we just have to increase the intensity a little bit and try to get to 3.0. But he actually had over 20, almost 27 minutes in that zone. That's excellent. All right, we have heart rate monitors. Obviously, that sheet was there. Hopefully, you're wearing them at some point this semester. The other T, so we have frequency, we have intensity, and now we have the T stands for time. And time means how long do you do physical activity? How long should you? It's a good question. Aerobically, you should exercise for a minimum of 20 minutes, but could go on. I know sometimes when I'm training for a marathon, I could be running for 4 hours. Your body could do that. People do Ironmans, and it's a 16-hour race. They're in the aerobic zone for 16 hours. So minimum of 20, who knows how long you could go. Anaerobically could be as short as a second and no longer than 20 minutes. So think of lifting in the weight room, you might just do 1 push-up or 1 bench press. That's anaerobic exercise. You usually have to rest after that. Okay? And then the last T is type. So what type of exercise do you want to do? And this is really easy. You just have all kinds of choices. You could run, you could swim, you could walk, you could rollerblade. It doesn't matter, but you have to think about, is it aerobic or is it anaerobic? Swimming, for example, is it anaerobic or aerobic? And you have to think, well, what am I doing? If I'm going to just go swim for a half an hour, that's aerobic. But if I'm going to swim for a half an hour and in it I'm going to swim as hard as I can for a minute and then rest for 2 minutes, that would be anaerobic. right? We have all kinds of choices for exercise. It could be sport. It could be just lifting weights, okay? So that does it for the FIT principle. Hopefully you're prepared to do your personal fitness plan, and we'll see you for the next one.